The airport was a world of noise and rushing people. The sound of 100 suitcases rolling on the hard floor echoed around me. To my ears, it sounded like a drumbeat of judgment, telling me I didn't belong here. Move faster, Mia. My father's voice cut through the noise, sharp and impatient. He didn't look back at me. He just expected me to keep up. You're holding us up. Again, he said. I bit the inside of my cheek to stop myself from saying anything. I just shuffled my worn-out sneakers and stepped to the side, letting a busy family rush past me. Before we go any further, I'd love to know who's listening to this story. Where are you from? Tell me your city in the comments below. And after you hear everything, I want you to be honest. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Tell me in the comments. We read every single one. Now, let's get back to the story. My stepsister, Laya, took the chance to stride past me. Her designer high heels made a sharp, clicking sound on the polished floor. Click, click, click. It was like a clock, counting down the seconds, until my humiliation was complete. She tossed her long, glossy blonde hair over her shoulder and gave me a look. Her lips curled into a smirk. You know, Dad, she said, not taking her eyes off me. Maybe she's just nervous. This is probably her first time seeing a plane up close. My father let out a short, harsh laugh. He didn't even try to be kind. She can't even afford a seat in the back of the plane, Laya. Don't expect her to know how a real airport works. A few people nearby, who had overheard, chuckled softly. I felt a wave of heat rush to my face, burning my cheeks. But I didn't say a word. I just gripped the strap of my old, faded backpack tighter and stared out the giant glass windows. Huge airplanes sat on the tarmac, gleaming like giant metal birds under the morning sun. They were all flying first class to New York for a big family celebration, a party for my father's new company success. I had been technically invited, but it was one of those invitations that feels more like a duty than a desire. They didn't really want me there. They just felt they had to ask. Laya waved her first-class boarding pass in the air, a triumphant little flag. First-class boarding starts now, Daddy, she sang. We'll be sipping champagne before we even leave the ground. She looked right at me. Too bad you can't join us. Enjoy your flight, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh, don't be so bitter, Mia. Some of us just make better choices in life, that's all. That one stung. It stung, because 2 years ago, I had made a choice. A hard one. I had walked away from my father's company after he married Alara, a woman only 5 years older than me. Almost overnight, he started treating Alara's daughter, Laya, like his own. He handed her the projects I had built. He gave her the office that should have been mine. He acted like my years of hard work meant nothing. Now they stood there, a perfect picture of wealth and status, designer luggage, first-class tickets, smug smiles. And I was the outsider, the afterthought, the one with the second-hand suitcase, and the quiet, forgotten dreams. My father stepped a little closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. Do us all a favor, Mia, he said, his eyes cold. When you get to New York, try not to embarrass the family name. People talk, you know. I finally looked up and met his gaze directly. People always talk, Dad, I replied, my own voice surprisingly steady. But it's what they say later that really matters. He looked surprised, and maybe a little angry, that I had answered back. But before he could say anything, the loudspeaker crackled to life. Flight 227, non-stop service to New York, now boarding first-class passengers at Gate B12. That was their call. They gathered their expensive carry-ons. Laya linked her arm through my father's, casting one last look over her shoulder. See you in coach, she called out, her voice sweet and poisonous. If you can even afford the ticket, that is. Their laughter trailed behind them as they walked down the corridor toward the gate. I stood perfectly still and watched them go. I watched until they disappeared into the tunnel that led to the airplane. My chest felt tight, like a heavy weight was sitting on it, but I kept my face calm. I refused to let them see me cry. All around me, life went on. Travelers rushed to their gates. Families hugged goodbye. Businessmen stared at their phones. A small child was crying because he dropped his toy. It was the usual chaos of an airport. And then, a shadow fell across the floor in front of me. It was a man, tall and standing very straight. He was wearing a crisp, navy blue uniform with polished black boots. He stopped directly in front of me. Miss Monroe? He asked. His voice was calm, but it held a tone of command. In the distance, I could still faintly hear my father's laughing voice. Yes? I said. That's me. The officer stood even straighter, if that was possible. Your jet is ready for you, ma'am. We will begin the pre-flight checks whenever you are ready. His words cut through the airport noise like a thunderclap. I saw my father, who was almost at the gate, stop dead in his tracks. He turned around slowly. Next to him, Laya froze. The color drained from both their faces, leaving them pale and shocked. A dozen other passengers nearby stopped what they were doing to stare. I blinked slowly, letting the moment sink in. Then, a small, calm smile spread across my face. "Perfect timing," I said, my voice clear and strong. I was getting tired of standing here. A wave of gasps and whispers rippled through the crowd as the officer, whose name tag read Grant, gestured gracefully toward a separate, secluded part of the airport. It was the private terminal, a place I had only ever seen in movies. A sleek, black luxury car was waiting right on the tarmac, near a beautiful, small private jet. Laya's mouth fell wide open. A jet?" she stammered, pointing. "For her?" Officer Grant gave a professional, single nod. "Yes, ma'am. The Gulfstream G550 is registered to and owned by Miss Monroe." I let my eyes meet my father's stunned gaze. I saw the confusion, the disbelief, the shattered pride. "You are right, Dad," I said, my voice soft but carrying in the sudden quiet. "I can't afford economy." I paused, letting my words hang in the air. "It's far too small for me now." And with that, I turned my back on them. I walked away, my steps calm and measured, even though my heart was pounding like a wild drum in my chest. The automatic doors to the private terminal slid open silently, and bright sunlight spilled out, washing over me. The wind whipped my hair around my face, and the deep hum of airplane engines filled my ears. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like a disappointment. I felt untouchable. The door of the private jet closed behind me with a soft, secure hiss. Suddenly, all the noise of the main terminal, the announcements, the chatter, their laughter, was gone. It was replaced by a profound quiet. The air inside smelled amazing, like rich, polished leather and freshly brewed espresso. "Welcome aboard, Miss Monroe," Officer Grant said. Now that we were away from the crowd, his formal stance relaxed slightly, and he offered me a genuine, respectful smile. It was the kind of look you give someone when you truly know who they are and what they've accomplished. "Thank you, Grant," I said. I walked over to a wide, incredibly soft, cream-colored seat by the window and sank into it. As the powerful engines rumbled to life beneath the floor, I looked down. The city where I had grown up, where I had been so unhappy, now looked like a tiny, distant model. It was a story I had already finished reading, and I was ready for the next chapter. Just as the plane began to taxi toward the runway, my phone buzzed on the table beside me. The screen lit up with a single word: Dad. I let it ring 2 times, taking a deep breath. Then, I pressed the answer button. "Mia," his voice snapped through the speaker, as sharp and angry as ever. "What kind of stupid stunt are you trying to pull? What is this joke?" "This isn't a joke, Dad," I replied, my voice cool and even. "It's my life. I just decided to stop living by your narrow definition of success." "I told you to be practical," he yelled. I could picture his face, red, with fury. "I told you to get a real job. Instead, you ran off chasing childish dreams." "Dreams," I said, leaning my head back against the soft leather. "Those childish dreams built the company that is now more successful than yours, Dad. The same company I helped design from the ground up, before you decided to replace me with Leia." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing heavily. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, tighter. "You could have stayed, Mia. You didn't have to just walk out on your family." I turned to look out the window. The plane was picking up speed, racing down the runway. But in my mind, I was back in that office 2 years ago. I could hear the shouting. I could feel the sting of his betrayal. I could see him handing my entire project portfolio, my designs, my plans, my heart and soul, to Leia, as if I had never existed. "You're right," I said softly, as the jet's wheels left the ground. "I didn't have to. I chose to." There was a click, and the line went dead. He had hung up. Grant approached me and set a thin, elegant folder on the table. "Your full itinerary, ma'am. You have a meeting with the venture capital investors in Manhattan at 3 p.m. Your security team will escort you directly from our private terminal." "Thank you, Grant," I said, closing the folder. I already knew every detail by heart. He hesitated for a moment, as if he wasn't sure he should speak. "If I may say so, Miss Monroe, it's not every day you see someone take back everything they lost. And in such a dramatic fashion." I gave him a faint, tired smile. "It's not about taking it back, Grant. It's about becoming the person they always told you could never be." The engines roared with power, and the plane soared upward, climbing above the clouds. The movement was so smooth and powerful, it felt defiant. I watched as the world below, the houses, the cars, the entire city, was swallowed up by a sea of fluffy white clouds. My own faint reflection stared back at me from the window. I looked older, calmer, stronger. 2 years ago, I had walked out of my father's office with nothing but a laptop bag slung over my shoulder and a handful of business contacts in my phone. That was it. That was all I had. But I had made a promise to myself in that moment. I would never, ever, beg anyone for a chance again. While Laya was busy flaunting her new glamorous life on social media, pictures of fancy dinners, new cars, vacations, I was working. I spent my days and nights in a small, dusty office, coding, designing, and building a startup that everyone told me would fail. My company was called Monrovia Systems, a tech company focused on smart logistics. When the first investors laughed at my ideas, I thanked them for their time and found new ones. When the bank refused to give me a loan, I sold my car to pay the rent. When everything seemed dark and impossible, I would close my eyes and remember the humiliation in my father's boardroom. I would hear his exact words, spoken with such certainty. "You'll never make it without me, Mia. You're not strong enough." But I was, and I did. That small, silly idea he had mocked was now a global tech solution, valued at hundreds of millions of dollars. Every single insult, every laugh, every door that had been slammed in my face, it had all been a brick. And I had used every one of those bricks to build the woman who was now sitting on this jet. The gentle voice of my assistant, Sophie, came through the jet's intercom. "Ma'am, we're getting calls from the New York media. They've heard you'll be attending the Global Tech Summit this evening. Would you like to issue a statement?" I glanced at my phone. Another message had come in from my father. This one was just a single word. How? My fingers flew over the screen as I typed my reply. "By being everything you were afraid I could become." I pressed send. The jet sliced smoothly through the clouds, and the afternoon sun streamed into the cabin, bathing everything in a warm, golden light. The woman reflected in the glass looked like a stranger to the girl I had been. For years, I had let my family define me as the quiet one, the failure, the forgotten daughter. But now, they would have to learn my name all over again. They would see it on billboards, in business magazines, and on the headlines of every major news outlet. And tonight, when I landed in New York, the very same family that had laughed at me in the airport would be attending the same huge tech summit. The summit that, unbeknownst to them, was being sponsored by my company. I smiled as the iconic New York skyline began to rise in the distance, a forest of steel and glass and ambition. I realized then that the real takeoff hadn't just happened when this plane left the ground. It had started 2 years ago, the day I found the courage to walk away from them. The jet's wheels touched down on the New York runway with a gentle, low hum. Out the window, the Manhattan skyline stood tall and glittering, like a challenge waiting to be met. I took a slow, deep breath, gathering my thoughts and my strength. Tonight wasn't just another business event. For me, it was about closure. Grant escorted me down the plane steps to a waiting black SUV with dark, tinted windows. The moment the car door closed, sealing us in a quiet, peaceful bubble, my assistant Sophie turned from the front passenger seat. She held her tablet. Her face lit up with excitement. "Everything is set, ma'am. The Global Tech Summit begins in 2 hours. You are scheduled to open the event as the keynote sponsor." "Perfect," I said. My voice was steady, even though I could feel my own pulse beating a nervous rhythm in my wrists. "And the guest list," Sophie continued, a knowing smile playing on her lips. "Richard Monroe and his daughter Leia confirmed their attendance this morning." "Of course they did," I said. My father never missed a chance to be seen at a high-profile event. It was all about image for him. But what he didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that my company, Monrovia Systems, wasn't just sponsoring the summit this year. We owned it. As the SUV glided silently through the crowded New York streets, I caught quick glimpses of the city. On a huge digital billboard, I saw my company's logo, a sleek, neon blue M against a black background, flashing for all to see. 2 years ago, I was the invisible daughter. Tonight, I was the headline. When we pulled up to the stunning glass-covered venue, it was like a scene from a movie. Dozens of camera lights flashed like a swarm of fireflies. Reporters and photographers crowded the red carpet, their voices a loud, excited buzz. I stepped out of the car. I was wearing a simple, elegant, navy blue dress. It wasn't from a famous designer. It was mine. It was confident. A journalist shoved a microphone toward me. "Miss Monroe, is it true that Monrovia Systems has purchased the entire global tech network?" I met her eager gaze and allowed myself a small, faint smile. "Let's just say," I replied calmly, "I like to own the places I was once denied entry to." The crowd of reporters erupted with more questions, but I just smiled and walked inside. The inside of the venue was even more breathtaking. Giant crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, scattering light across the shiny marble floors. The room was a sea of people, in expensive suits and beautiful gowns, all holding champagne glasses and talking loudly. It was a world of money, ego, and power, the exact same world that had laughed at me and pushed me out. And then, I saw them. Across the huge hall, my father, Richard Monroe, was holding court. He was surrounded by a group of important-looking investors, telling a story and making them laugh. His new wife, Ilara, stood beside him, looking polished and perfect. And Laya was there, hovering nearby in a flashy red gown, smiling brightly at anyone who would look her way. Her laughter echoed across the room, just as it had in the airport. They hadn't seen me yet. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice boomed from the stage. "Please welcome tonight's keynote speaker, the founder and CEO of Monrovia Systems." Polite applause filled the room. My father, still laughing at his own joke, turned toward the stage and began clapping politely. Then he froze. His hands stopped in midair. The stage lights came up, illuminating my face as I walked toward the microphone. Laya's smile vanished. Her glass almost slipped from her hand. "Mia?" I saw her mouth form the word, her face a mask of pure shock. I smiled calmly, my heels making no sound on the stage as I stepped up to the podium. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice clear and strong through the microphone. 2 years ago, I was told I would never belong in a room like this. I paused, looking out at the silent, attentive crowd. Tonight, my company is proud to sponsor it. A light, impressed laugh rippled through the audience. They thought I was making a joke, but I wasn't joking. I let my gaze travel across the room until it landed directly on my father. His expression was unreadable. "I built Monrovia Systems from a single laptop," I continued, my voice unwavering. "I started in the corner of a noisy coffee shop. I had no family money, no rich investors. All I had was grit, and the memory of being told, over and over, that I wasn't good enough." I saw Laya's face twist with anger, but I kept going. People often ask me what the secret to success is. What motivates you? For me, the answer was simple. Being humiliated is a much louder, much more powerful teacher than being privileged. This time, the applause that rose up was not polite. It was genuine and scattered throughout the room. My father's hands were still frozen. He wasn't clapping. After my speech ended and the crowd began to mingle again, I saw him moving toward me. He walked slowly, cautiously, as if he were walking through a field full of traps. "Mia," he said when he finally reached me. I had no idea you were so successful." I didn't let him finish. "No, you didn't," I interrupted, my tone soft but sharp. "You were too busy celebrating my replacement." Laya stepped forward, her face pale. "We didn't mean for." "You meant every word of it, Laya," I said quietly, cutting her off. "At the airport. In the office. Every time you laughed at what you thought was my failure. But you all forgot one thing. Some people rebuild themselves in silence." My father looked down at the shiny floor. "You're still my daughter," he mumbled, as if that changed anything. I nodded. "Yes, I am. I'm just not the daughter you tried to raise." All around us, the party continued. Business partners came up to shake my hand. Journalists asked for interviews. My father just stood there, lost in the swirling lights and noise, finally realizing that the world he thought he ruled had a new queen. That night, I didn't just win. I rewrote our entire story, and they were forced to watch it happen. The night slowly began to wind down. The loud music softened to a gentle hum. The investors were finishing their drinks. The journalists were putting away their notebooks. But in the middle of the grand ballroom, my father still stood frozen, watching me. Watching the daughter he had dismissed now command the attention of everyone in the room. I didn't gloat. I didn't walk over to him and say, "I told you so." I didn't need to. Their stunned silence was a victory in itself. Sophie came over to me, holding a glass of sparkling water. "Ma'am, the media would like a closing statement before we officially end the event." I took the glass from her, but my eyes were still on my father across the room. "Let them wait for 1 minute," I said softly. Laya was standing beside him, her bright red lipstick smudged slightly. She was whispering something urgently into his ear, but he wasn't listening. He wasn't moving. The arrogant, proud look was gone from his face. It was replaced by something else. Disbelief, shock, and maybe, just maybe, a flicker of regret. When I finally decided to walk over to them, the conversations near us grew quieter. People were watching. My father straightened his suit jacket, trying to pull back some of his old dignity. "Mia," he said, his voice quiet and tired. "I should have seen it. You were always so smart. I never thought you could do it without me." I didn't let him finish. "You made that very clear," I said, my voice calm. He let out a long, shaky breath. I said things I regret. No, I replied, setting my glass down on a nearby table. You said things that built me. They were the bricks I used to build my own foundation. His eyes met mine. They looked tired and defeated. You could have told me, he said. We could have worked together. We could have been a team. I gave him a faint, sad smile. You taught me that working with you meant slowly disappearing, Dad. I didn't walk away to punish you. I walked away so I could remember who I was. Leia couldn't stay quiet any longer. She stepped forward, forcing a shaky, fake laugh. Oh, come on, Mia. Don't act like you're some kind of hero. You just got lucky with a few investors. That's all this is. I turned to look at her, my smile not fading. Luck doesn't keep a company running for 2 straight years, Leia. And investors don't just hand you money. They invest in belief. And that's something you never had in anyone but yourself. Her face hardened into an angry mask. You think all of this makes you better than us? No, I said, and I truly meant it. It doesn't make me better. It just makes me free. Behind me, the announcer was asking for me to come to the stage for the closing remarks. Sophie was gesturing for me to come, but I raised my hand slightly. 1 second, I said to her. I looked back at my father, my voice dropping to a softer, more real tone. You want to know what hurt the most? It wasn't losing my place in the company. It was realizing that my own family only seemed to value me when I was useful to them, when I was convenient. He swallowed hard. I could see his Adam's apple move in his throat. You're right, he whispered. I failed you. For a single moment, looking at his defeated posture, I almost believed he was sincere. I almost felt sorry for him. But some apologies come far too late to fix the damage. So instead of feeling bitter or angry, I decided to offer him something he absolutely did not expect. Grace, I forgive you, Dad, I said quietly. He blinked, completely stunned. Mia, I forgive you, I repeated. Not because you deserve it, but because I do. I've been carrying the weight of your disappointment for far too long. I'm tired. I'm setting it down. I stepped back, my eyes moving to the glowing banner above the stage. Monrovia Systems, building the future. You were right about one thing at the airport, Dad, I said, smiling softly. I couldn't afford economy. I turned to walk toward the stage and the waiting crowd. I was never meant to fly that low. I walked back to the stage. The spotlight found me. The cameras began to roll again. A huge, thunderous applause filled the hall as I gave my final speech of the night. I talked about resilience. I talked about the power of rebuilding yourself from the ground up. I talked about how being underestimated can be the best training ground for success. But as I spoke, I saw my father and Leia near the exit. They weren't trying to talk to anyone anymore. They were just watching the daughter and sister they had mocked, now being celebrated by an entire empire. When the applause finally ended, I stepped off the stage, my heart feeling strangely calm and light. Sophie handed me my coat and whispered, You did it. You really did it. I looked back one last time toward the doors where my family had been standing. They were gone.